Namaskar. I welcome all of you to my YouTube channel Agribusiness A Journey. Today I will discuss about another critical factor in economy, that is unemployment. I divide this course into two parts, part 1 and part 2. In part 1 I will describe why unemployment situation comes in developed countries and underdeveloped and developing countries, and in part 2 I will describe about what are the issues or consequences in unemployment and what are the solutions against that unemployment. Before that, we should know about what are the characteristics or what are the basic characteristics of the developed countries and what are the basic characteristics of the underdeveloped countries or developing countries, where the entrepreneurship jobs come from the private sectors or the private jobs are quite higher. Jobs come from the industries, jobs come from the service sectors are more seen in the developed countries. In that context, the agriculture is highly dominated in underdeveloped and the developing countries. High population and the thickly populations will be observed in the underdeveloped and the developing countries. Though there is agricultural dependent and high population parameters are there in underdeveloped and the developing countries, so there is a chances of low productivity and income. Consequently, we will find the economic disparity or inequalities in underdeveloped and the developing countries. But whatever the scenario is there, though entrepreneurship, private jobs come from the service sectors and the industrializations are quite higher in developed countries, so high capital formation will be observed in the developed countries, whereas poor capital formation will be observed in the underdeveloped and the developing countries. When there is high capital formation, then there is the chances of high production of the goods and services for the consumer or the customer in developed countries, whereas in developing countries we will find very less goods and services for the consumers or the customers in the underdeveloped and the developing countries. Though there are produce more goods and services, unemployment occurs in developed countries due to the less aggregate demand, whereas in developing countries and underdeveloped countries, unemployment occurs due to the less aggregate supply. Question arises, when there is the large productions of the goods and services in developed countries, then why there is very poor aggregate demand? It occurs because though they have very high capital, but their capacity has not been utilized properly. Why they have not utilized their capacity properly? Because they have very saturated economy. Everyone have their enough product in their hand. They have no demand. Whereas in underdeveloped countries and the developing countries, due to the poor capital formation, they will not produce the aggregate supply. Their population is quite higher, but whatever the supply will come, that is not sufficient. So to fulfill the unemployment situation or to target the unemployment situations, developed countries always looks towards the east and the underdeveloped countries and the developing countries always looks towards the west. It means underdeveloped countries and the developing countries export the raw materials and import the finished good, whereas developed countries export the finished good to the underdeveloped and developing countries. This is the situations occurs. So you will find the cyclical unemployment situations in developed countries, whereas seasonal unemployment, structural unemployment, frictional unemployment, and along with the disguised unemployment, these four categories of the unemployment will be seen in underdeveloped countries and the developing countries. Next part, I will describe about what are the consequences or issues through the unemployment situations and what are the probable solutions against the unemployment situations in both developed countries and the developing countries. Thank you all.